The recent attempted purchase of Twitter by entrepreneur Elon Musk reportedly fell apart because there were too many bots or fake participants on Twitter. And it brought to the public attention a problem in social media, which are fake members of different social media, sometimes using this to achieve nefarious ends. And so we're presenting a special Saving America panel discussion. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. And we've got a great pair of participants with us today. First of all, Vic Hartman is principal of the Hartman Firm, LLC in Atlanta, Georgia. He's an attorney and a CPA. He's a special agent with the FBI for 25 years, where he investigated fraud, white-collar crime, and corruption matters, which included, by the way, he spent some time here in Houston and worked on the famed Enron collapse and the fraud behind that. His firm specializes in internal investigations, forensic accounting, and fraud mitigation consulting. He's the author of the book, The Honest Truth About Fraud, a former FBI agent tells all. And I haven't read that yet, but it sounds great. He's past president of the Georgia Chapter Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. And by the way, I've spoken for the Houston chapter of that group. And he served on Atlanta's governing board of Office of Inspector General. No less is our second guest. The Honorable Dietrich von Biedenfeld is a municipal judge, assistant professor of business law and supply chain management. Not sure how you put those two together, but it sounds good to me. And Governor Greg Abbott's representative on the Public Transportation Advisory Committee. He has served as a committee chairman for the American Bar Association, a trustee for Columbia United Methodist Church, and moderator for numerous expert panels. Professor von Biedenfeld's work experience prior to being an academic included risk assessment and analysis, compliance, and contract management work. So with such an august panel, we're going to go ahead and hear from Vic Hartman first.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Schein. And when you were telling me about your experience on LinkedIn where you got approached by somebody and of course you didn't get defrauded because your antennas were up, but really resonated with me because I have a client here in Atlanta, Georgia, that did get victimized by a scam that was amazingly similar to yours. So that was, and it also bring my awareness to social media fraud, and especially on LinkedIn. I spent a lot of time thinking about fraud. I teach it, speak it, wrote a book on it. This insights into the LinkedIn fraud was new until I had this client, and now I've learned a lot about it. So I'm glad to be here on this podcast, kind of a social or public service announcement awareness. Hopefully we can do some good and bring people's attention to this so they don't become defrauded by this. And social media can be used to defraud in several different ways. And there's nothing new about con man frauds. It's an ancient old trade where people get defrauded. In fact, David Marr wrote a book, The Big Con, the story of the confidence man. And the word con is from confidence man. But there's nothing new about this. In fact, that book inspired the movie, the screenplay for The Sting, starring Paul Newman and Robert Redford. But so now we see these frauds, and they also introduced the term the long con, which means they're very patient, they're very persistent. There's not just a short con where you meet someone on the street and trying to defraud you. It's a long con. And that's what reminds me with this LinkedIn, it's a long con because they get to know you and defraud you over a period of time. In LinkedIn, there's some studies that show in the US, LinkedIn is the most trusted social internet site. And so trust is the key to all frauds and confidence con man schemes. It's trust-based. And why do we trust LinkedIn? Because it's our peers, right? The people we know, we brought into our inner circle. They're our same profession, same credentials. We may go to the same university. So we have this affinity with each other and we trust. And so there's a lot of fake accounts on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's reported they just removed 32 million fake accounts. I think they have 880 million accounts total worldwide. So it's a big platform and they are constantly trying to remove these fake accounts. But a fake account will be set up And it's the long con. So they're patient. They make their bona fides look legitimate. And they may even start befriending some of the same people that you have in your circle, so that when you see them, you're like, oh, well, my good friend John has trusted this person as well. So now it's just trust-based and you start feeling comfortable, especially when you deal with them for a long period of time. Now, the case involving my client here in Atlanta, sophisticated individual. I would never, now that I've got to know him, I would never thought he would have been defrauded by something like this. But it was an attractive Asian female, which is a common scenario. And that's what happened to him. Befriended him. They first started talking about gym exercises and working out and health and eating right and healthy. And then she referred to, my uncle has this investment where he's working well. This is where it gets tricky and some red flags should start going up. Wanted him to invest using cryptocurrency. They were speaking on WhatsApp. Now WhatsApp is encrypted end to end. So it's very hard now when you want to, law enforcement needs to trace this. It's hard to find these calls and find out who you're talking with. So they were using WhatsApp, paid for it in Bitcoin. And then my client was trading in precious metals, primarily gold. And on a platform on the phone where he could see what his investments were and they were doing well. So he invested more and more money. And then when it got up to well over $100,000, the lights went out and no communication, started ghosting him. He realized he had been the victim of fraud. So now that I've researched this and see how this works, this is a very, fraudsters change their modalities and exactly how they do this in the platforms and within the techniques. But basically they're gaining trust. They're telling you to invest in something. You think you're doing well, you put more money in, and then you realize you've been defrauded. Now we brought this case to the FBI and currently being pursued, but chances are not hopeful. First of all, these actors are probably overseas, highly probable. Some of them in the Southeast Asia area where a lot of these frauds are happening, but it could be anywhere. It could be former Russian republics, could be Russia, could be in the US, it really could be anywhere. Because of the techniques they're using WhatsApp and cryptocurrencies. Now, my client used Bitcoin, which is very traceable. That's misunderstanding that you can't trace cryptocurrencies. Some you can, some you can't. But Bitcoin is very traceable. However, that just because you can trace it doesn't mean you know which wallet it's going to and who's the owner. Mm-hmm. So it makes it very difficult for these individuals to recoup their monies. Former friend of mine and current head of the San Francisco office was just recently interviewed by some of the media, and they're seeing a big spike in this LinkedIn fraud. In this, I'm sure it's in San Francisco, but it's everywhere across the U.S. and probably the world. Mm-hmm. So that's LinkedIn, where they're targeting you specifically. LinkedIn and other social media can also be used as a platform for a term called spear phishing. Spear phishing is when somebody wants to come at you and put malware on your computer so they can introduce ransomware or participate in business email compromise or use some other frauds, but they want to get malware on your computer. So how do they do that? How do they induce you to make a wrong keystroke so that you'll download their malware? Well, we know a lot about you because of us that are on LinkedIn. It's easy to see your bona fides, where you went to school, what city you're in, your profession. So therefore you can construct emails. Say you're a big fan of the University of Georgia Bulldogs. Well, you send them an email on Monday morning after the big game, and you just mention how about the Bulldogs won. Well, immediately you're starting to resonate with that person. It seems real. And you can change the email address by one letter so it looks like it's coming from somebody you know, because you know who their acquaintances are because you can see who they're connected on LinkedIn. And all of a sudden, the email becomes very trusted. All that information, and then you make the wrong decision to click and download malware, and you've now been infected. But that information can come to us through information from social media, including LinkedIn. A lot of other social media type frauds. There's romance schemes. Generally, it's older, divorced, or widowed women, but it can be anybody. This has been a big spike in this in the last many years. People are losing the hundreds of millions of dollars for these romance schemes. They want relationships on the internet, and they it's a trusted person, and then they depart with their funds. Work from home scams. So of all the email scams and frauds, the bad actors need to launder their money, and they need to do it so they can't be traced. So another scam is to paste on social media sites, work from home scams. That was a scam. They think they're working from home, and they start moving, they're using their bank account. They either their personal bank account, or they set up one, and then the bad actors are using their money, their bank accounts to launder money. So that's just an adjunct to all these other schemes. They need to launder their money, and so you may have a work from home scam, which effectively involves you moving money. But the key to all this is trust. So fraud is a trust-based scenario. And I think the more we have awareness of how we mistrust, how we misplace our trust through things like LinkedIn. If we have an awareness, so people are watching and get educated here from your webcast, your podcast, the way you communicate this, they'll have an awareness. And now when somebody comes at us on LinkedIn that we're not familiar with, our antennas will go up, and maybe we'll have an awareness, and we won't make that decision to part with our funds and get defrauded.
Yeah, really fascinating information, Vic. Professor von Dienveld, tell us a little bit more about your viewpoints on this.
I echo Vic's sentiments 100%. And one of the aspects when we particularly emphasize LinkedIn as one of the social media platforms, building trust is a little bit easier because of the connectivity, but also people's guards are down a little bit more because this is generally public information. If you Google me, you can see where I work. So I'm not as anticipatory of fraud, and I'm not as sort of weary or leery of connections as I might be on my Facebook or Instagram pages where I'm sharing vacation pictures or I'm sharing personal information. So this is a professional site with information that would otherwise be readily available. However, we've then packaged it, sorted it, categorized it for potential fraudsters. So we've created this one-stop shopping center with our interests, with our professional backgrounds. And it now in this international commercial space, it's very possible that you have met somebody at a conference in Milan or in Colombia. And so it's more probable than back in the day where you had to meet somebody in person. We know that sociologically, group behavior is pretty understandable, but then there are some aspects of our psychological identities that are pretty prevalent. That is, we like attractive people. So when somebody attractive wants to talk to us, again, our guards drop a little bit more, and it's easy to formulate these images because unlike in person where you might need some plastic surgery and expensive clothes, people can formulate an identity using borrowed pictures. They can use Photoshop. So they can create or sort of manufacture this identity and tailor it to different people. Also, unlike a conversation like we're having now synchronously, this asynchronous environment of the digital world allows people to target multiple folks, and so they can increase the return on investment. So then it becomes more lucrative to sort of perpetuate these frauds and manipulate people. And LinkedIn is a great platform, as we said, where your guard is down because you're already trying to network with new people. You're trying to expand your professional network to add value. And that isn't the same as our Facebook, where we're connecting with friends or checking in on relatives. So we're already opening ourselves up to foreign actors or unfamiliar faces. Additionally, you factor in the idea that people may, from overseas, take an identity that is difficult to verify. If you say you went to the University of Georgia and you got a Master of Philosophy, and I know that University of Georgia doesn't have that program, they only have a Doctor of Philosophy program, for example, hypothetically, then I can fact check you a little bit easier. I'm familiar. Or if you use vernacular that's unfamiliar. If you're in Texan and you say pop or soda, my guard's immediately going to go up. Now, we call it Coke here, right? Sprite, Dr. Pepper, it's all Coke. So if you say pop or soda, I'm already leery. But if you're an international actor, if you're based in Taiwan, if you're based in Egypt, or perceptually based even in Europe, I'm going to have a harder time saying, wait a second. So as Vic said, your antenna don't go up as quickly because you're already opening yourself up to unfamiliar people with that intended purpose. You've already packaged, sorted, and categorized your personal information as related to your profession and interests. And you've already sort of opened the door for potential connections. And because of that, it's also easier because people are connected in different ways. And so one of the ways that you can, in your social media, sort of do an initial screening of whether somebody is an identity fraudster or sort of a created or fabricated identity is how many other connections you have. But it's very possible that the person with 13 or 18 similar connections on LinkedIn has simply found people in your network who just click accept every time. Particularly if it's somebody at the dean level or a college president. These are individuals who are already seeking out new students. They're hopefully trying to get international student dollars because international students pay more. And so then you see, oh, well, this person's connected to the provost here and the dean here. And so they've already passed that initial validation where people, again, in their social media, Facebook or Instagram, may have weeded them out. And so you don't have that. You look and you say, okay, we've got one connection in common. None of this makes any sense. All your pictures were uploaded June 15th, and now you're contacting me. This is clearly fake. Well, LinkedIn doesn't really use that same sort of documentation of vacations where you can say, okay, all your pictures are from June 15th. This is a fabricated identity. So that even that structure of LinkedIn makes it a little bit more difficult to verify. And of course, all you need is that opening for somebody to come in and either get you involved in a fraudulent scam or even send some sort of virus through your computer and open that network, right? We know that identity theft and identity fraud costs over $50 billion per year in our economy. And that, again, that fraud isn't just identity theft. That may be 15 million or so US citizens, but there are even more people who are victims. A third of us have experienced some form of identity-related fraud victimization. And the Federal Trade Commission has handled over 2 million cases per year over the last decade of these types of identity fraud reporting. So even simple things where you have a picture of your family on your rear window, we've now learned that people are even using that information to target you. Okay, we know that they have 3 children, we know they play soccer, and their names are even under the names of the stick figures of this family. We're gonna go kidnap and human traffic their kids because now we can just say, hey, Amber, hey, Tony, because we know your names from the windshield. So we've gotta be especially leery because people are getting more sophisticated, more bold, and using even the most innocuous information that we take for granted in ways to manipulate and maneuver themselves, basically expanding and evolving these age-old practices in a way that is unhelpful. And as Vic pointed out, just because you trace it, just because you identify it, doesn't translate into economic recovery of damages, and it doesn't translate into wiping the virus from your computer, because just because you caught the scam early on, if you accepted that connection, engaged in a conversation, realize that that person is not an actual person or not who they say they are, somebody else may have already in your company or organization may have added them based on you having that connection. So by the time you realize it, 3 other people have added this individual, and one of those folks, we've now increased the probability that they will accept something, click a link that they shouldn't be clicking and open it up to malware or viruses, or that they will provide information that further perpetuates that fraud. So it's a growing problem. We know everything has a cost. Traffic costs our economy money, but this is a $1 billion sort of drain on our overall economy and our sense of trust.
I think your last word is an important one too. It's a sense of trust. It is once you've been through one of these situations, it really makes it difficult to trust in the future. Now, one thing I did want to note about this is I was approached about a month ago by one of these who fits this exact profile, and I actually reported it to LinkedIn. And I said, this fits a pattern, I think there's a concern here. And LinkedIn about 36 hours later came back and said, we don't see any reason for a problem. We're not going to block the person. You are certainly welcome to block them individually. But I think this is kind of the root of the problem is that even if you report them to LinkedIn, if you cannot say, well, this person defrauded me out of $100,000, LinkedIn is not taking the type of action that we would hope to see. And again, relating back to my opening comments is, Elon Musk has estimated that Twitter may have 20% of their alleged participation are bots. So that's not necessarily the same as a fraudulent thing, but we don't know what these bots are about. So anyway, with that, let's all just talk for a few minutes about this important topic, because it does present a drain on our systems, and it damages the opportunity that all three of us have to develop good, legitimate connections on a site like LinkedIn.
Yeah, this is just a challenging thread. The fact that you even report to LinkedIn and they wouldn't remove it, I'm sure they have an algorithm, a program that looks at new accounts, and if certain indicators are present, they'll knock them off. They've knocked off 32 million as fake accounts. But if there's, if they've been on for several weeks or months, and they have all the bona fides of a new LinkedIn connection, they don't want to knock off a reputable or an honest profile or individual. So they're in a trick box as well.
Yeah.
I think the key to this is just awareness. It's one of these frauds that's very clever, and if you fall for it, it's hard to find the bad actor. Most frauds, you just trace the money and you find out the bad actor and you can arrest them and prosecute them. This case, they're probably in a foreign country, and the methods of tracing them through WhatsApp, cryptocurrencies, ever how you get defrauded, they're very smart and clever, and they've done it in a way that makes them very difficult to trace. And my client was very similar to yours. It wouldn't surprise me if we're not dealing with the same actors here. That's just so common. You mentioned Canada. My case has a connection to Canada. They actually opened up some companies, some LLCs in Canada, and was a legitimate company registered out of Canada. So it's interesting that that person used the name Canada.
Yeah.
I think awareness is really the most important thing for this. Is just awareness. When it's happening to you, you'll know not to be defrauded because you see all these red flags.
And these actors operate in traditional methods, just on a broader scale, with the protection of that digital veil. And so these are no different than credit card theft rings from the 90s, where you have an organization and they share information, they share tactics. And unless you're dealing with the government, though, there are ways, as Vic mentioned, the awareness, being cognizant of not only the number of connections, but also what have they posted or interacted with recently. So one of the nice things about LinkedIn is there is an activity log. And so sometimes if I just see someone's listing as a college education and maybe a brief synopsis of what they do in that area, sometimes you can immediately flag them because it's a nonsensical res ipsa loquitur generated statement that just is a rambling run-on sentence of I am best practices and I like cheese and I am okay. No, you're flagged, you're gone. Additionally, though, with the connections and some of those questions that you asked Dr. Schein, yeah, that you can ask them about the weather, but they might Google that. Some of the ways that I've tricked people, I guess, into revealing themselves is by using outdated information that anybody operating in that sphere would know. You mentioned the shooting. I might reference a company like Pan Am or Blockbuster. And if somebody starts talking about the Blockbuster in their neighborhood, you're shut down, right? Sorry, you don't have one, because I don't have one. So if you're not in this same sphere, so some of those fact checking or validation tools, including requesting a formal link to like their company website. Now, of course, you've got sophisticated folks, even foreign governments, that perpetuate some of this fraud online and manipulation. And so, of course, if they've got those resources, they may have a legitimate LLC or website, but the majority of these areas are so sort of elementary in their construction that they're easily detected with a basic, as Vic said, awareness or due diligence. So you just do that simple checking because they're shooting a shotgun. They're counting on sending out 1,000 requests, and if they get one bite, they've covered the cost of that time. And the downside is we don't get that time back, and we know time is money. So there is an economic harm, not only in losing that trust, but the qualitative loss of time that could be spent networking with actual colleagues who could add value to our employment or our communities, right? So that networking and innovation that comes through collaborative relationships, we lose that because we've got to spend an extra 5 to 10 minutes screening a connection as opposed to just clicking accept. And then we've got to spend another 10, 15 minutes trying to figure out, okay, what is the pitch? If you're promising Bernie Madoff returns, I'm immediately incredulous, because if you're making that kind of money, you don't have time to reach out to me anyway. You don't want my professor salary in your portfolio. That's embarrassing to you. So I'm suspect. But if they can get one of my connections, or even waste that time, that's time that I'm connected to them, that they can start panning out and using that validation of being connected to me to build a seeming authenticity or validity to their profiles.
The one thing I didn't mention earlier is that there was a lot of with a handful of these random contacts, a lot of personal information, like pictures of attractive women at the gym, pictures of food, literally, hey, this is what I'm having for dinner, and stuff like that. So there were some things like that make it appear that it's a legitimate connection. But like I said, they all had the commonalities of there was always a big pitch. And I think that ties in with a very critical term that I don't think the general public is as sensitive to. I mean, if you connect on one day and you say, hey, let me have $25,000 the next day, almost all of us, even the most gullible, will say no. But if you send me pictures of yourself at the gym, and then pictures of your dinner and stuff like that, you develop, as Vic indicated, the long con. And the long con, of course, is the most dangerous one, because you actually think that you have a relationship. By the way, one of the things that I did find interesting is WhatsApp, of course, is an audio-visual connection. I couldn't get a single one of these people to have a live conversation with me. And in fact, one by accident connected with me, and it did appear to be a very vague picture of a young Asian female who was not anywhere near the appearance of the person who was on the website, by the way. And when she realized that she had connected and that I was actually attempting to talk to her, she hung up very quickly and said, oh, I have a technical problem. I can't, my connection's not working. But they are very eager to not have the live connection, because obviously you could ask some, they don't have their script writers there handling the stuff. And in the brief conversation I had, her English was not anywhere near the level of communication that I had been receiving through that alleged site. So there
But
might
you can also screenshot their picture and identify them, and they certainly don't want that. So that
absolutely,
they're not going to let you see them.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that, Vic. That's what we need an FBI agent to talk about. It is, getting a screenshot of these people, of a real person, as opposed, or voice print even, of a real person, as opposed to the what we're seeing, these obviously posed pictures that are designed to attract people. And I did hear recently of one of the news reports was that there was a public report of a woman who was scammed out of, I think, $250,000. And of course, they always say in those news reports, are life savings. And I sure hope it wasn't her whole life savings. But in her case, the perpetrator appeared to be a male and presented himself as that. And I'm assuming this was a single female. So that's a relatively recent news report. One of the things that I put in my file when I was getting ready to suggest this panel. So it isn't just men, but I think that our business society is still very male dominated. Men, I think, still control a significant amount of money, and maybe at least to the perpetrators appear to be more gullible than the women. But this is something that both is applied to both men and women, I think.
And I think some of that is the human behavior aspect, because when we look at how many words are used per day, or even the types of questions, I know that my sisters might have a more personal question about my well-being that would be harder to fabricate and go for the long con than a lot of my male colleagues, who are a lot more interested in, what did you accomplish today? And that's a very simple thing, right? I made $8 million with my Bitcoin account today, as opposed to, how are you feeling? Oh gosh, well now Now, if my English isn't proficient or I'm not 100% familiar, it's going to be very easy to mess that up with somebody who's asking probative questions about your well-being, your personality, and your mindset, as opposed to a lot of, I think more of my guy friends do tend to focus more on those quantitative metrics of what time did you wake up this morning and what did you have for breakfast? Oh, well, now I can send you a picture and build that connection. Here's what I'm eating. Now it could be borrowed from the internet. My simulated persona is very healthy, right? Now, actually, if I were to accidentally connect, right, you might not see something that good. But here's a screenshot from an internet search engine, and now it's easy to create it. But that awareness, due diligence, and cognizance is definitely going to be one of the ways, and it is helpful, even if LinkedIn won't be helpful with the algorithms and identifying things, because you can show that recent activity. If all the posts you like are kittens, or everything you're liking is horoscopes, and then you're immediately telling me about some complex financial investment, I'm thinking, you're not watching TED Talks on LinkedIn. You don't have any LinkedIn learning certificates. You're not a person of continuous improvement. Everything on your profile is personal. This is your family. This is you at the gym. Where are your work certificates? And so one of the ways, as you mentioned, Dr. Schein, one of the ways that I've screened people as well is, if they want to talk about business, set up a Zoom meeting. And
Yes.
if your office doesn't have any of your college degrees or have books like y'all have in a background or any of those things, I'm wondering what kind of reputation you're perpetuating on the internet, that if we met in person, this con wouldn't work.
Well, gentlemen, as you know, we try and keep these short because we actually want people to watch them and benefit from the information in them. So any closing words, Vic, you want to go first?
Well, I appreciate you having me on. We could talk about this for a long period of time. I think everybody gets this, but when we interact with people on LinkedIn or social media, I think we'll do it now through a new lens. We'll have an awareness and maybe won't be victimized by these frauds.
Super. And Dietrich?
No, I appreciate both of y'all's information and conceptualizing it, providing the terminology of that online safety and really protecting our reputational value, but also protecting these professional networks that we can use to improve. So thank y'all for sharing your information. I just encourage folks to do that basic due diligence. And as soon as they discover some sort of fraud, remove that connection, even if you don't report it, because otherwise other individuals who are connected to you may perceive of that as some sort of approval or express consent that this person is legitimate when they aren't. So as soon as you identify it, remove that connection so that it doesn't show up as a shared connection.
Super. Thank you so much, both of you. You've been our great guests on the special episode of Saving America, talking about social media fraud. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast or webcast platform.